Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the AM Report for HAPS News, the network of now. I'm your host, Alex Mahajer, and it is Monday, December 7th. Today is the deadline to vote to register to vote in Georgia ahead of the January 5th Senate runoff elections that are happening there. And it's coming right on. We're going to discuss this morning with Rance Collins, the editor-in-chief of 800 Democrat. These pair of very strange Senate debates that happened in Georgia yesterday. We're going to talk about that. We're going to cover all of today's top headlines, all of this and more on the AM Report. Good morning, everybody, and thank you so much for joining. I'm Alex Mahajer. If you're watching on the HAPS app, website, or platform, click the award button. Let us know you're watching. Good morning, Shivani from Brooklyn. It's good to see you. And if you're watching us on Facebook, Reddit, YouTube, Twitter, or Periscope, wherever you're watching, leave a comment in the comment section and we'll bat around with you live on air. And I'll be joined in just a moment by Rance Collins. He's the editor-in-chief of 800 Democrat to discuss these Georgia debates that happened yesterday. Very odd pair of debates that happened in Georgia yesterday. But first, we've got some headlines to cover. Joe Biden, President-elect Joe Biden, has announced his health team, and that's going to include California Attorney General Xavier Becerra to lead the Department of Health and Human Services. Xavier Becerra is a pretty well-liked political figure here in California. He's a rising star in the Democratic Party, and it's a welcome choice. Former New York City Mayor, Trump personal attorney, and star of Borat 2, Rudy Giuliani, has tested positive for the coronavirus. Not a surprise, given all the public appearances that he's been making lately and his disdain for masks. Americans could start receiving doses of the coronavirus vaccine as early as this Friday, according to the FDA. The U.S. average of daily cases is nearing 200,000, with officials pointing to cold weather and their behavioral choices as the reason. So everybody mask up, socially distance. We have a vaccine on the horizon. Details of a $908 billion economic stimulus package are set to be released today as negotiations between House Speaker Nancy Pelosi and Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell continue on. And it looks like they've decided on language that they can both agree upon ahead of their Christmas break. Finally, at long last, a long overdue second economic stimulus package. Trump spent the majority of his rally in Valdosta, Georgia, on Saturday night, ripping the elections as being fraudulent and rigged, but also simultaneously urging people to go vote in the runoff on January 5th, 2021. And here to talk about the January 5th runoff is Rance Collins. He's the editor-in-chief of 800 Democrat and a dear friend of the program. Good morning, Rance.
Good morning, Alex. It's great to be here.
It's good to see you. It's good to have the TSN network back together again.
Rance, I
I
wore my extra tight shirt, the tightest one I could find for the tight shirt network.
I'm sure our viewers will appreciate that greatly, Rance. You've been on top of finding the tightest shirt possible. You've also been watching these Georgia debates and watching the Georgia Senate races very closely. And these races are extremely important because they're going to determine the power structure of the Senate as we go into a Joe Biden presidency. Whether Democrats or Republicans have control of that body will be decided by these races. And there was a pair of debates that happened yesterday in Georgia. Now, one of them was between Jon Ossoff, Democrat. He's the challenger to incumbent Senator David Perdue. And then the second was Democratic challenger Reverend Raphael Warnock seeking to unseat incumbent appointed Senator, Republican Senator Kelly Loeffler. And both were very odd for different reasons. But did you watch the debates, and what was your overall take as we break them down for our viewers?
Well, I gotta tell you, I thought that the Jon Ossoff debate was substantive and well-grounded, and just really gave me a lot of hope for this, the future of this country. I think it was probably because David Perdue wasn't there that I felt that way. His lack of presence really just highlighted how much better the other party is. But then, of course, there was the other debate, which was between Raphael Warnock and I think a robot. I'm not sure for sure. It could have just been, I don't know, the Stepford senator. But regardless, the interesting thing was yesterday that we had two debates with very charismatic, very I don't intelligent, well-rounded Democrats, and then we had them debating essentially people who just weren't there. And as far as I could tell, even though she may have physically been there, I didn't see any evidence that Kelly Loeffler was there.
That's for sure, Rance. And there's a lot to unpack there. And I don't know who to start with. Should we start with Kelly Loeffler or should we start with David Perdue? Let's start with David. Let's start with the race between David Perdue and Jon Ossoff. So David Perdue's in a lot of hot water because there's a lot of news coming out about his stock trades that have happened all year and where he's personally benefited from the coronavirus pandemic and his role as a U.S. senator. And Jon Ossoff has been very forceful in previous debates. Before the November 3rd election, they had debated, and Jon Ossoff called him a crook very famously. And Jon Ossoff is really hammering David Perdue for being a no-show at this debate last night. And it was a very striking visual because you had Jon Ossoff there, and the Atlanta Press Club, which was responsible for this debate, really almost was chiding David Perdue for not being there because they had an empty podium and they had a camera on the empty podium as if to constantly suggest the sitting United States senator in this seat who is seeking your vote for this seat is not present. And Jon Ossoff hit him on that last night. And I want to play a clip for our viewers. This is Jon Ossoff during his debate with no-show David Perdue last night.
Perdue declined to participate. Jon Ossoff, you may now ask the question that you would have asked him and answer that question yourself. You have 90 seconds.
I appreciate that. Well, it's a strange situation to be asking a question of a sitting United States senator who is not here to debate as he asks for the votes of the people to be reelected. Senator Perdue, I suppose, doesn't feel that he can handle himself in debate, or perhaps is concerned that he may incriminate himself in debate, both of which, in my opinion, are disqualifying for a U.S. senator seeking re-election. He may not wish to be asked questions, for example, about his trades in Regions Bank while he championed legislation to benefit the firm, or his trading of defense contractor stocks while he directed taxpayer dollars to them. But whatever the reason that Senator Perdue is not with us today, I think what I would ask him is why he continues to oppose $1,200 stimulus checks for the American people at this moment of crisis, why he fought against them in the first place, and why he isn't in Washington right now championing direct financial relief, stimulus checks directly for an American people who are suffering. If I had the opportunity to ask the senator a question, if the senator were not too much of a coward to debate in public, then that's what I'd ask him.
Too much of a coward, Jon Ossoff says. He's too much of a coward, and really nailing David Perdue for his no-show, and rightfully so. Rance, what were your thoughts on that?
I mean, it summed up exactly what the issue is, not just with David Perdue, but I think with Senate Republicans in general. David Perdue, whether intentionally or unintentionally, gave the perfect metaphor for what has been the problem with the GOP Senate for the last few years. They simply just don't show up for the American people. And this has never been clearer than the past few months when they've continually not shown up again and again and again when we have much needed coronavirus relief legislation that needs to be passed. This was optically, I cannot figure out why David Perdue thought that this would be a better idea than just showing up and taking it like a man.
I have to wonder. I mean, it's almost like when Donald Trump refused to release his tax returns. I mean, it's got to be really bad for David Perdue right now that he's really afraid to show up and take the heat from his Democratic challenger, Jon Ossoff, really nailing him on that. And so there was a second debate, and that was between Kelly Loeffler and Reverend Raphael Warnock, Rance. And Kelly Loeffler had a deranged performance. That's the only word I can really use to describe it. And I have a supercut here of it's an 85-second video that summarizes her entire debate performance. And let's play this. This is what I like to call the Kelly Loeffler supercut.
You know, Chuck Schumer said, now we take Georgia, then we change America. I'm fighting for every single Georgian to live the American dream. Chuck Schumer of socialism, the American dream. Radical liberal Raphael Warnock, the American dream. Radical liberal Raphael Warnock. Radical liberal Raphael Warnock. Chuck Schumer's radical agenda. Defund the police, Marxism, socialism, and Marxism. Radical liberal Raphael Warnock. I'm here working for Georgia. Defund the police. Radical liberal Raphael Warnock. Chuck Schumer. Radical liberal Raphael Warnock, radical liberal Raphael Warnock, Chuck Schumer, and Nancy Pelosi of the American dream. I started filling out a time card when I was 11 of the American dream. Radical liberal Raphael Warnock, the socialist of the American dream. Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer, radical liberal Raphael Warnock, supporting the American dream, socialism. Radical liberal Raphael Warnock of the American dream, socialism, defunding the police. Chuck Schumer is radical liberal Raphael Warnock to defund the police. Radical agenda of the abortion on demand. Radical liberal Raphael Warnock, radical liberal Raphael Warnock, defund the police, to defund the police, defund the police. The American dream, the American dream, the American dream, socialism, the American dream, the American dream. Chuck Schumer, radical liberal Raphael Warnock was socialist.
Everyone involved in tonight's production sends their condolences to the Loeffler campaign.
That was not a manipulated video. That was a spliced together representation of just how many times Kelly Loeffler hit buzzwords like defund the police, Chuck Schumer, Nancy Pelosi, socialism, radical liberal, Reverend Raphael Warnock. And Rance, what was Kelly Loeffler thinking in this performance?
You know, again, you're assuming that there's a thought pattern here. I just was bowled over as I was watching her speak, not only in the repetitiveness of her speech, but in the fact that I mean this with all sincerity, and I want to point out that I think that there are many Republicans, even Republican senators who are good on the stump and who I can understand the appeal behind. Kelly Loeffler just doesn't have a personality. I don't know how else to put it. I was just kind of like bowled over by how little expression, how little modulation in her tone of voice. There was something that seemed very cold and very inhumane about the way that she presented herself. It was honestly startling. I've never seen a debate performance that was so devoid of human qualities.
And then to just constantly recite the same buzzwords over and over in response to every question. In response to just every question.
This is where I go back to her being like a robot. She was like a robot that had short-circuited and just kept repeating the same praises over and over again. It was the same episode of Small Wonder over and over and over again.
Yeah, we got some comments chiming in. She was like a robot, says Morton Jenkins. Susan Tennant says the left is not a radical left. She just hears that from Trump and repeats it. It was very much so. Like she had just rehearsed these buzzwords. Someone told her, just keep calling him a radical liberal and keep saying socialism. Just say it over and over again. And she did it. She took it to such an extreme that it ended up looking ridiculous and almost really counterproductive to what she was trying to do, which was, I think, was trying to insinuate that he's a radical liberal and a socialist. But at some point it becomes so brazen, and you've really, like beating a dead horse, that it only made her look sort of deranged, in my opinion. What did you guys think watching at home of Kelly Loeffler's performance in that supercut? Leave us a comment and let us know. And Rance, by comparison, here's a little bit of Reverend Raphael Warnock in his debate performance last night. Let's hear from the Reverend.
Kelly Loeffler's out of touch. She's thinking about people who are like her. And I'm okay with the fact that she wants to make money. I just think you shouldn't use the people's seat to enrich yourself. You ought to use the people's seat to represent the people.
I'd like to respond.
Please do.
Look, these are more lies from radical liberal Raphael Warnock.
Center ordinary people in all of the policy that we do. I grew up with a father and a mother who instilled into me great values. And my dad had a way of saying, get up and put your shoes on. And so he gave me this sense of a work ethic. But if I'm honest, that alone would not put me here on this stage. I mean, here's a kid who grew up in public housing. I'm running for the United States Senate against the wealthiest member of Congress. Only in America is that possible. And I am fighting to make sure that kids like me, whether they're growing up in public housing down in Savannah, Georgia, or rural disaffected communities in North Georgia, that they have access to the American dream that I believe so much in. And I'm concerned that Washington is not focused on ordinary people. You can't tell the difference between Washington back rooms and corporate boardrooms. My opponent represents the worst of that kind of problem. And that's why I'm grateful for this opportunity.
I mean, a stark comparison, Rance. Some comments chiming in. Kelly Loeffler. I'm still not sure. Kelly Loeffler is a broken robot, says apprehensive. We're never going to know. Apprehensive Fly says Kelly Loeffler is a broken robot. That's sort of the sentiment that's been repeated on Twitter. A lot of people saying it was like she forgot to get charged in and was malfunctioning. But Warnock offered a stark comparison, talked about his roots as a Christian, as a reverend, his parents a lot, and how they instilled in him values, and how he's seeking to represent the people of Georgia. What, Rance, you're with 800 Democrat, you're watching these races closely. What does the polling suggest is the real success of Kelly Loeffler's campaign strategy here of casting Warnock out as a radical leftist socialist liberal? Is it having an impact on the race? What's the polling saying is happening in these races?
Well, I mean, there's been so little polling so far in the races. All we know is that it's kind of a dead heat. Every poll has been within margin of error. It's really hard to tell which way this race is going. And I think there have been 3 polls released on Real Clear Politics since the general election that have given us some type of snapshot as to what's going on in Georgia. And that is basically that this is a neck and neck race. I'm just assuming that she's thinking, Georgia is not a leftist state by any stretch of the imagination. It is a state where it has a more moderate Democratic Party. I'm guessing by tying them to what she thinks is the radical left is maybe her way of trying to pick up votes. It's what Republicans have done for generations, honestly. But the funny thing is, Chuck Schumer is not a radical leftist by any stretch of the imagination with anyone who has any knowledge of how politics works. Nancy Pelosi is, again, not a radical leftist. She's just saying the word and attaching Raphael Warnock's name to it, and yet these are not particularly radical Democrats even. I mean, neither one of them are for or even for the Green New Deal or Medicare for All. And those are the two hot button pieces of legislation that you always hear the Republicans deriding. I mean, I don't understand. There's no substance to this attack, which I mean, I know has never stopped a Republican in the past, but it's just completely baseless in this particular instance.
Yeah, and let's see. Comment from Apprehensive Fly. I don't understand how people like Kelly Loeffler or Donald Trump get more than one vote. The late David Bowie said it best. I'm afraid of Americans. I mean, it's true. It's sort of, when you look at this objectively, it's sort of hard to understand how someone like Kelly Loeffler might be competitive, but I can sort of prescribe tribalism and party politics as being the reason. And if we had been in a less divided time, perhaps people would vote their conscience more. But it's Kelly Laughter, says Noel Yamang. It's Kelly Laughter. So Rance, today is the deadline to register to vote in Georgia. If people are interested in the January 5th runoff election, December 7th today, voter registration deadline. You can do that online. December 14th, early in-person voting begins in Georgia, and on January 5th is election day. And I'm sure that you will be watching these races very closely, and we'll have you on soon again to discuss further developments. Thank you so much for joining this morning.
Of course, anytime.
We'll talk to you soon. This has been the AM Report with Perhaps News, the network of now. I'm Alex Mahajer. I'm your host. We are live every weekday morning at 7:30 a.m. Pacific, 10:30 Eastern, with all of your quick political news and headlines to get your day started right. If you like this journalism, if you like this content, please consider sponsoring or subscribing. You can do that at haps.tv/@Alex. And we will see you all tomorrow morning. Thank you for joining, everybody.